Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Tonight, we have quite a few topics to talk about, but we're going to begin with the main topic of tonight, which is Gaza, the ceasefire, the reports coming from Israel about progress on Wednesday, potentially releasing prisoners on Saturday, and the Israeli delegation potentially getting the powers to close a deal on Wednesday. We're having a repeat of similar reports like the ones we heard before the ceasefire began. But before that, we have some interesting statements coming from Adam Boehler. Adam Boehler is the United States representative going and negotiating with Hamas. We spoke about this report since it came out, really, and the fact that Israel was not satisfied with it. There were other confirmations as well that Israel was actually the state that released and leaked this information in an attempt to hinder the prospect of the United States reaching a deal with Hamas. However, too late. Clearly, some things are progressing now. So, what exactly happened? Here we go. That's what happened. So, Adam Boehler had this interview here, and they were talking about the prospect of a deal with Hamas. And, you're going and talking with them, and Donald Trump is having these statements against them. And, the host is asking him, don't you think some people might be upset about the fact that you're going there and, you're talking with these guys? They might not really be happy about it. Now, the response was very interesting. And many people are actually starting to speak about it now, including in Israel. In Israel, they're criticizing the United States, some people, but on the other hand, there is progress on the ground. There are indications on the ground that there is indeed progress. Okay, so let's hear exactly what Adam Boehler said. Here is the video.
Understand why Netanyahu, Dermer, others might be upset.
I do understand. I spoke with Ron, and I'm sympathetic. He has someone that he doesn't know well, making direct contact with Hamas. Maybe I would see them and say, look, they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're actually guys like us. They're pretty nice guys. So he doesn't know me, and there are big stakes. He lives in a country where if it sets certain precedents, then it will hurt or help a lot of other people. So I understand the consternation and the concern, and I wasn't upset. At the same time, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. We have specific interests at play.
Understand
Again.
Why Netanyahu, Dermer, others might be upset.
I do understand. I spoke with Ron, and I'm sympathetic. He has someone that he doesn't know well, making direct contact with Hamas. Maybe I would see them and say, look, they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're actually guys like us. They're pretty nice guys. So he doesn't know me, and there are big stakes. He lives in a country where if it sets certain precedents, then it will hurt or help a lot of other people. So I understand the consternation and the concern, and I wasn't upset. At the same time, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. We have specific interests at play.
Nice guys, we're the US, we're not an agent from Israel. He understands if these people get upset because of his direct talks. This is Adam Boehler, the negotiator of the United States, speaking with Hamas directly without including Israel. Israel leaked the report of him negotiating with Hamas to hinder the prospect of reaching a deal. But again, it's happening on the ground. And like we always say, look at what's happening on the ground at the end of the day between the United States and all of the other countries involved and the developments in Gaza and what they build and what happens later on. So this is coming, but it's coming in a context. What's the context? Well, the context is there are now talks inside of Israel that there is progress. There is a progress in relation to the actual ceasefire, and that we actually might have a deal being done on Wednesday. How did it begin? Well, certain reports said the Israeli delegation, their powers that they go with to Doha to continue the negotiations will be discussed in the cabinet meeting. Now, it has been confirmed that they are going on Wednesday. Usually, when there's a report in Israel that says their powers are going to be discussed in the cabinet, that means that Israel is intending to give them powers to close the deal and continue. Because one of the main problems of the Israeli delegation was, are we going to get the powers to go and agree with them? Netanyahu sent them stripped of powers. They didn't really have any powers to get a deal. Many of them were complaining about that. And Haaretz even reported that we could potentially have a deal, an agreement closed on Wednesday, and some of the Israeli prisoners of war going back on Saturday or Sunday. Now, the big question is, what does it include? We're not having a lot of information about that. But we do know that Hamas said we're not extending the ceasefire unless we're talking about a phase 2 and the ending of the war. Some of the reports in Israel are saying that, yeah, well, we actually might reach a deal. Certain reports saying that ceasefire, 5 to 10 years, the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, as well, certain reports about this prospect of a long deal as well, meaning, well, the talks between the United States directly and Hamas clearly pushed things forward slightly without too many indications about the prospects, about the contents of the actual ceasefire agreement, similar to what we had with the first phase, with phase 1 of the ceasefire agreement. Why? So that it doesn't look too much damaging on Israel. So it doesn't look too bad on Israel, because Benjamin Netanyahu wouldn't be able to handle it. And he would risk certain interests that he has internally, including popularity, including calculations, everything to do with internal politics inside of Israel. There is something else that is indicating that we actually might see some interesting developments. Okay. And then, of course, Hamas, they also said, Tahir al-Nouna, one of their senior figures, he said we actually might release Aidan Alexander, his name is, who's a dual national, in the next phase of the ceasefire, but indicating that this ceasefire will be a long-term ceasefire. So, what happened inside of Israel? This is the very important bit. What happened in Israel is Smotrich, Bezalel Smotrich, he is suspected of getting information from the Israeli army directly without notifying the relevant bodies, without due diligence. Benjamin Netanyahu was blamed of that previously. He managed to get himself out of it. However, it's very interesting, and I will tell you why, that this report is coming now. Smotrich reportedly suspected of receiving information from an IDF mole. And guess what? He confirms that he actually did, not long after. He doesn't have a problem admitting it. Later on, he said this, proudly admitting being fed military intel outside accepted channels. This is not something light, by the way. This is something very, very dangerous. Why? Because it's not in his authority. He is a finance minister. He is a member of the war cabinet. And now he's confirming, and his excuse is, I meet them in the synagogue. My synagogue is full of people who go and fight, and I get information. But the information that the Israelis were talking about in this report here, suspected of receiving information from an IDF mole, didn't talk about some random information like he was coming to the meetings with full reports. All right. Why Smotrich? Because Smotrich was the main problem. Because Smotrich was the main obstacle in going into phase 2. So there could be an attempt happening in front of us of Benjamin Netanyahu framing something against Bezalel Smotrich to make him out appear to as if he's appearing to be the bad guy, so that he can go into phase two. Whether as an attempt to expel him completely from the government with a good excuse, or to use this as leverage against Bezalel Smotrich so he can accept the phase two of the ceasefire and remain in the government. Do you understand what Netanyahu is doing? This could be used as leverage against him. And now Benjamin Netanyahu could go into the ceasefire agreement to tell him, if you don't accept and sign that you will remain in the government up until the end of my term, then I will take further action against you and you will be facing hell in Israeli courts for the next several years because you've done something that puts the country's risk and national security at a very high risk. That's something very dangerous. Potentially, that's why he later on came up with this, a very rushed confirmation saying, yeah, and I speak with people to let the people think that he has nothing to hide and that he gets this information from people in the synagogue. This move is primarily made by Benjamin Netanyahu against Bezalel Smotrich. Do you know why? Because there is no other reason to publish this report now. All of the cabinet meetings that took place with all of these piles of reports, they happened a very long time ago. In the past almost 50 days, there was no constant combat inside of Gaza. There was a ceasefire. Why bring this information now? It's because he's bringing this information now at a very sensitive period to apply pressure on Bezalel Smotrich to accept phase two of the ceasefire. Meaning, Benjamin Netanyahu could lay at rest. On Wednesday, the delegation can go to Doha. They can sign. The Americans are already speaking with Hamas, calling them nice guys and we're no agents of Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu would shut up and Smotrich would shut up and will continue with the ceasefire agreement. That is a very important bit. Now, if we talk about the actual delegation, well, the delegation is still made out of the same people that Benjamin Netanyahu appointed. Who are they? They are Ron Dermer, primarily, alongside the other delegation. He's now trying to sack the head of the Shabak, Ronen Bar, and he is sending Ron Dermer, but not to delay everything, but just to actually get this deal done. Get this deal done and move on. Very interesting days ahead, and we will see what happens on Wednesday when things go forward, especially in Doha. Now, Hamas, from their end, they confirmed that they're already there, meaning that Hamas now officially entered. Hamas officially entered the negotiations again. They're no longer playing a part that is outside or anything of the sort. They are in, they're talking, and they are interested to get more out of this deal, especially with the feedback coming from the United States and with the fact that the United States is saying that, oh yeah, we have these positive talks and these positive vibes with Hamas and nice guys and all of that talk. Beautiful. That's number one. That's Gaza. Moving on to the next subject that I wanted to talk to you about, Syria. Syria, very important developments, very tense situations. And it depends on which side you're on in Syria. Each side is saying what one side is saying. Those who oppose the government, they've been carrying out these massacres against minorities. And the pro-government are saying this is only a campaign against the remnants of Bashar al-Assad. How do we find out the truth or what's closest to the truth from what's happening in Syria? Well, it's very basic. We go down to the facts and we try and establish an opinion, a valid opinion, without all of this drama and sensationalism going on in mainstream media and recycling of videos without due diligence. What do? You see independent organizations who have been monitoring what's happening in Syria. For the past 14 years, one of them was the Syrian Network for Human Rights. Totally independent. They previously monitored breaches from the Assad government. They monitored breaches from the opposition as well. And they talk about exactly what's happening inside of Syria, regardless of the side. And they're not based in Syria, so no one can say that there's pressure on them. Okay. They had a statement. One of their directors actually had a statement. There were also statements from Rami Makhlouf. Rami Makhlouf is the cousin of Bashar al-Assad, a very close, very powerful figure inside of Syria, going out with a very interesting statement. And more developments on the ground, including certain actions coming from the new Syrian government. But we're going to start off with what the director of the Syrian Network for Human Rights said. His name is Fadl Abdel Ghani. Fadl Abdel Ghani has been monitoring everything for the past 15 years. SNHR. Okay, what did he say? He said in the past few days, 624 people were killed. And when he talks about the numbers of Syria, he means breaches. So people killed during sensitive events, and there could be breaches of human rights. And he spoke with statistics based on reports coming directly to him from Syria. Okay. The first thing that he said is, from the 6th of March, 624 Syrians were killed. He said that there was a campaign that began with Assad loyalists launching an attack on the armed forces of the government. According to him, Assad loyalists killed 315 people, 167 from the general security forces of Syria. Some numbers went higher, but we're just referring to the SNHR at the moment. And 148 civilians. 327, on the other hand, were killed by government forces and armed movements considered to be allied to the government who were carrying arms. They killed people who were carrying arms. However, other people were not carrying arms. And according to him, some of them were stripped of arms, but there could have been killings of civilians from those forces and the forces allied with them, including women and children. That's a very dangerous thing. However, one thing he added is some of these movements who carried out the killings were movements who are allied with the government but do not fall under the defense ministry directly, which is another very important link that raises questions as to, well, how many forces abide by everything to do with the government. After this, there was another report, and this report is very important as well. Rami Makhlouf, this man here. So Rami Makhlouf was a very close person to Bashar al-Assad, and he held a very strong position inside of Syria. He held the Assad army 4th Division officers responsible for the incidents on the Syrian coast. Again, this man is a man who is a total Assad loyalist, the cousin of al-Assad, and he even had a statement on Facebook. He had a statement on Facebook. This is the statement that he had on Facebook. Very long statement and very recent as well in Arabic, but there is, of course, the translation. This translation is very important. Okay. What is he saying? Horrifying scenes, horrible massacres, systematic humiliation, video clips they are proud of, how they torture, how they slaughter, how they shoot from feet to head, then suddenly stop fighting to perform Maghrib and Iftar prayers while fasting, then they resume. There is no might or power except for Allah, is saying. Entire families exterminated with their women and children until the number reaches nearly 6,000 martyrs and over 13,000 injured. Again, these numbers are from him. They're quite far off from the numbers that were published by the Syrian Network of Human Rights, an independent human rights network that monitors breaches from every side so that no one can actually come up and say, oh, hold on, you're only saying this and you're only criticizing that. However, he's saying 6,000. And after all this torture and killing, the bodies are left on the streets and prevented from burial. After all these horrific scenes, we saw the most horrific, some martyrs going with bodies thrown in the streets, organs stolen. Okay, he's continuing then. So what did you do to our people? Okay, this is the important bit here. From Rami Makhlouf, no one can deny how close he is to al-Assad and how leading he was in the previous Assad government. He's saying this. So what did you do to our people? Fourth Officer Dalla, okay? Not sure if it's the right translation here, with the chief military security and some civilians around you. He's blaming the 4th division of this previous Syrian army. Did you trade the blood of our people? Didn't you expect that after what you did, the security elements would have a reaction that would be very violent? Why did these poor civilians mess with you and exploit their need for money, having lost their civilian and military jobs? He's blaming them exploitation of the population in the areas from which they attacked the government forces, thinking that you took over the area and needed them to guard it. You took money and paid our people with blood, humiliation, and hunger. You had a tractor army full of kit and equipment from the 4th Division and the Republican Guard, and many teams by the tens of thousands with planes, tanks, and ammunition, and you dropped it all and ran. Does this make sense to go back to a homeland that you lost with a few civilians and leaders of motor groups by Darwish, the runaway president? Weren't you satisfied? He's directing this to Bashar al-Assad, and he's his cousin. Weren't you satisfied with that? Of what you have done before, destroying the country, dividing it, destroying its army and economy, starving its people, and on top of that, ran away with money. If it were distributed to the people, there would have been no hunger or poverty. And today I came across this stupid move to kill the rest of the sect that sacrificed the most precious youth so that the country does not fall. For all the blood of those innocent young men who spilled their blood on your necks. My coastal people, I swear to God Almighty that I warned everyone of any stupid move could lead the cult to slaughter and extermination. And he's saying, we feel your suffering, we feel your pain, loss of loved ones in the most horrific ways of killing. We made a great effort to stop these massacres in any way. Now, and most importantly, we are working seriously and at the highest level of coordination to find radical solutions that prevent such events from recurring. Ensure safety and security for all our people in these regions and prevent all those abuses and violations. Pray for us. Okay. And then he made another statement, praying for, what's good for the Syrian people. Rami Makhlouf, the cousin of Bashar al-Assad, made this statement, directly blaming the Assad remnants inside of the Latakia province of starting all of this blatantly. And if you don't know who Rami Makhlouf is, again, go and review him, go and research him and see who he is and who he was in the previous Assad government. What does that tell us? Well, these leading figures, alongside statements on the ground, alongside the Syrian Syrian Network for Human Rights, are saying that this whole campaign has been started by the Assad remnants. Yet some people want us to believe that all of a sudden massacres started occurring and happening inside of Syria, when that wasn't the case, as confirmed by these people and by the network, by the Syrian Network of Human Rights. Now, we're not going to go to the disinformation because there's plenty of that and you have many accounts to follow for disinformation. That's not the main thing. And many videos and people debunking, some people claiming that they've been killed and then they're going out and debunking all of the narratives and all of the fake propaganda going on and roaming around. But we have a job to be done here, which is go and do the research, bring people the true, genuine information that might not be comfortable for people. whether you're supportive or not. Okay. Does this mean that the current Syrian government was right in its response and what it has done and it had no breaches? No. That means that they too made mistakes. And those mistakes included killing innocent people. That's what the Syrian Network for Human Rights says. And that's what some elements on the ground are revealing now. Okay? Beautiful. What are they going to do? If they're saying that the remnants of al-Assad started this whole campaign and they were the ones starting to massacre people, because according to the reports from people on the ground, the remnants of al-Assad, and according to Rami Makhlouf's statement, they were pretending initially to be armed forces massacring civilians in those areas, threatening them. And then they started to have the clash after the ambush that they had against the government forces in what appeared to be a very coordinated attack to try and take down the whole state rather than, just an ambush against some people. Clearly, we know who started it. The government, they had to respond. They responded. Their response had breaches. So someone needs to be held accountable. Is the government capable of holding people to account? That's one of the big questions that's happening now in Syria. Well, based on what happened in the previous 3 months, and judging by the fact that they had the power, if they wanted to go and commit massacres and kill people like left, right, and center, by the way, they could have done that months ago. But we know where this started and where this came from. Assad remnants, as confirmed by Assad regime people, 4th Division, and other members of the ex-Assad army. They had breaches. They proved before that they can actually punish people. There were people from HTS who are imprisoned, aren't they? There was a guy from HTS who promised all of a sudden to take down the Egyptian government, right? Several weeks back. Where is he now? He's in prison. Because the government told them, we're not going to interfere in other countries' governments. And there were other breaches where people were held to account. So that's clearly the case. The question is, well, how thorough is it going to be? And are people going to have full faith in it? And what are the exact moves that the Syrian state is going to take? Well, there were a couple of things. There were a couple of things that happened and came as a statement officially from the Syrian government. They said, we will be having a direct investigation, a committee formed out of certain people, some of whom are from those areas, and they will be holding everyone to account with all severity, and no one is above the law. That's the Syrian government. We will publish the results in 30 days. Ashara himself said, these are regime remnants. This was confirmed by Makhlouf, by the Syrian Network of Human Rights too, for anyone who doesn't like him, right? But he also said that they were supported with foreign workers who are working to create a sectarian war in the country and drag it into partition. Meaning, well, there are forces abroad. We know that there are forces who want to divide Syria, and they want to spread this hell inside of Syria of sectarian war. But the government has a really tough job to do. Number one, they need to hold people to account. Secondly, they need to confirm to the people and reassure them that all of that's going to happen. Thirdly, they're going to have to continue to chase the remnants of Bashar al-Assad. These people fled, some of them. Some of them fled to the mountains and to rural areas. And there were videos of them hiding in those areas. In the areas of the mountainous areas of Latakia, some of them shown to give up their weapons, some of them still keeping their weapons, however, going to the mountains. Okay, because so the government can't leave them alone. They have to chase them so that they can avoid going into another issue here, right? Now, you might say, if you know, so because some people are so misinformed, of course, there's so much propaganda going on. Why would the Assad forces go and kill other people too? As in people within their vicinity? Well, the guy who started this, right? Miqdad, he made a clear statement and he recorded himself. And that was his statement here. That was his statement.
ليك أنا وين يا حبيبي منك إله وإلها منك إله إلها قليلين الأصل. لما بيجي المعارض بيسمعك كلمة ما بتعتب عليه لأنه أنت حاربته، بس لما بتكون أنت يا خنزير من البيئة الحاضنة للنظام وكل عمرك بتطبل له بتزمر له، خاصة هي الحركة بتتذكروها بالروح بالدم، نفديك يا بشار بتتذكروها. هذه الحركة هي نفسها هي الحركة، بس انتم كنتوا تعملوها هيك. هلا صرتوا تحكوا على اللي كان بالجيش خنازير. انتم ابناء منطقتي حصرا اللي عم تكتبوا بالتعليقات وتحكوا انه انا زلمه الامام علي والطائفي متبراي مني وانا كنت عم بعمل وعم شيل وعم حط. انتم حسابكم عسير شباب وبنات، اسماءكم عندي، صفحاتكم صورتها، معلوماتكم جبتها بالحرف على الارض. اذا بدكم هلا ببعث لكم عالم تسلم عليكم بالايد وتاخذكم مباوسه، واذا بدكم انا بنزل لعنكم. انا ما عندي مشاكل مع القياده العسكري، اعطيني الامان وفيني بروح وبجي، بس انا ماني رضيان على حالي اني انزل وروح واجي، لاني انا بعتبرها هيك حسب عقليتي هزيمه لإلي. انا في علي الامان من القياده العسكريه، بنزل وبروح وبجي، والجماعه ما لهم مقصرين صراحه. مشكلتي انا مع مين؟ مع نفسي. انا مو رضيان على حالي انزل الا وانا قوي. انا لما بتشوفوا صوري مع جثي انتوا اللي عم تنشروا لي اياها، هي جثه انسان حمل سلاح بوجهي، ولو ما انا قتلته كان راح يقتلني. اتحداكم تجيبوا صوره او مقطع فيديو لإلي وانا عم بتقاوى على مدني. بالعكس، كل شيء مدنيين بيعرفوني، بيعرفوا مين انا وشو عملت. وانا شنعت بهدول الصور مع من حمل سلاح بوجهي، لانه شنع بكثير عالم غاليه لي من اقربائي، فكانت هي تار رد تار مو اكثر. ولكن تصيروا تنبحوا تقولوا مدنيين ابرياء ونحن وهي صوري مع مدنيين. اتحداك انت اللي عم تحكي هيك تجيب لي اثبات انه هدول مدنيين ابرياء. اتحداك اتحداك اتحداك. صرتوا هلا تحطوا العلم الاخضر وتحكوا وتنتقدونا، وخاصه لإلي تفوتوا على التعليقات وتكتبوا انه انا مجرم والله ينتقم مني. يا خنازير، انا ليكني موجود بيناتكم، اسماءكم عندي يا حبيباتي، لك انا بيناتكم.
So we'll take only this part. What did you understand from this part? Assad loyalist, previous government forces, what did he say? He received reassurance from HTS. He received amnesty. They treat him well. He was probably in the amnesty centers receiving an amnesty card. And he has a problem with his community, which is predominantly the Alawite community in that area, calling them pigs and warning them and telling them, I have your numbers and I have your profile pictures and I'm going to come and follow you. That's the mentality. And he's recording himself. That's for people who still suspect who started this, by the way. This is the same guy, previous armed forces of Bashar al-Assad, clearly indicating that these people started it. So there's no question that, number one, many of these people, well, they were known to the new government. Secondly, the new government gave them amnesty. Thirdly, well, somehow they didn't hand in all of their arms because the amnesty was subject to handing in your arms as well. And they give you an amnesty for 2 years. And even if you were in the previous Assad forces, then you're fine to continue so long as you hand down your weapons. However, some of these people who clearly have problems with themselves and their communities, they decided to seek revenge, and they started the massacres against the armed forces who gave them amnesty and against the civilians, because they're clearly threatening them here. And during their attacks on the civilians, they would probably say that we're from the armed forces. Again, not to say that there were no breaches from the government, because that's what the human rights networks are saying. However, what we do know is this is where it started. It didn't start like from all of a sudden, you know, some people decide to go and kill minority. And some people have the audacity to include like Christians as well or whatever. Even though we're just talking about a certain area that has an Alawite majority. And other areas, everything seems to be going fine. Okay. That tells you that these people, not only did they have problems with themselves and with the population surrounding them, and clearly couldn't handle the fact that al-Assad betrayed all of them, because these people, they were almost worshiping him at one point. There was clearly something also a bit organized here. Because, you know, just a group of people like that, you know, they need to have some sort of motivation to take a move, to kill 150 armed people and go and start killing their own people to start a bloody sectarian war that everyone will lose inside of Syria. All of that is very important. However, what is more important is how the new Syrian government will implement the things that they said they will be implementing. Number one, with the concern of these groups, as mentioned in the report of the Syrian Network for Human Rights, of armed groups still not directly belonging to the state participating and carrying out most of the breaches based on sectarianism, regardless of who started it. Secondly, how can they prevent something like that from happening later on? Thirdly, how they can manage all of that and still chase the people who actually started this. Because there's an argument for some people that you need to halt, for example, all operations so that tensions reduce. Although reports are saying in the past 24 hours that the situation has calmed down in Syria, in those areas. But these people are still there, which means, well, if you leave them to it, if the government withdraws its forces from those areas, they can prepare themselves, brace themselves for another attempt coming from these people to cause a bloody sectarian war, even with them killing people from their own community. And then things escalating from there. These are the main questions. So the things are very tense. Things are very tense. However, reports are saying that, you know, things are going to be worked on, controlled, independent investigation committee formed by several people to do with the judiciary, with the population in those areas to get a result. And of course, we'll see how that goes. Now, moving on to the next subject that I wanted to talk to you about. Israel, we're going to go back to Gaza. Israel is saying that, hold on a second, the United States, they want to have a deal between us and Gaza, and they are clearly actually taking some action now, sending a delegation potentially with powers for Wednesday, talking about the prospect of releasing people on Saturday. But they just shut down electricity off Gaza. Why are they shutting down the electricity off Gaza? Completely blackening Gaza. A few days back, there was an attack from Israel on the warehouses storing food. Okay, so the situation when it comes to food inside of Israel, inside of Gaza, has already been terrible because, you know, well, Israel imposed a blockade again, And now they're attacking the food supplies. Why are they doing this now? Why is Israel now shutting off the electricity of Gaza? Well, there are several reasons for it. Number one, to try and extract more, even more, from Hamas, potentially before closing the deal on Wednesday. That's if the deal is closed. If the deal is closed on Wednesday, you're talking about the end of the war. Because phase 2 includes declaring the end of the war. Therefore, Israel now knows that they have their last chance. They know that the United States is speaking with Hamas. Adam Boehler is saying these guys don't have horns. They are actually nice guys like us. But Israel is finding itself, well, I'm stuck in a very difficult position here. My biggest patron is doing this, and I have nothing to do but apply pressure again on the civilians, including, by the way, the Israeli prisoners of war, because if you want to cut electricity off Gaza, then, well, there's a big problem for them too. Well, Hamas always told them that. In hope that something would work. How likely is it to work? Not very likely. Not very likely. And again, the next few days would be detrimental in the progress of a full and final end of the war, especially with these talks, with the developments from Adam Boehler, and with the statements coming from Israel, and the moves that are happening with Smotrich, who's the obstacle in phase 2 or going into phase 2. All of these things are tied together, and it would be very important to monitor them and see how they proceed. Which leads us to the next two things that I wanted to talk to you about that are more on the larger geopolitical map. Number one, Erdogan is causing more headache to Israel. After the deal with Russia, Ma'arif said Erdogan stunned Israel with an unconditional move. They're having more and more tensions with Turkey in Syria. They know that things will not be going to their favor inside of Syria. They have been re-evaluating the level of threat Turkey has on Israel, and they're very worried from the ties that Turkey has with the new Syrian government and how much they support them against SDF. And in Israel's minds, in the Israeli mind, this led to the United States slightly backing down because they don't really want to have this confrontation, despite them being a NATO member. And this complaint coming from Israel is because he's having a veto against Israel from participating in any NATO moves. Erdogan continues hostile policy towards Israel and threatens to exploit Turkey's membership in alliance to block cooperation. Experts warn, according to the report, Turkey is holding NATO hostage, just as it did with Finland and Sweden in the past. What they didn't add is successfully applying pressure on Sweden and Finland to obtain what they need. And they reached a level where they're having very advanced Russian technology simultaneously with very advanced American technology. After the United States refused to send them the F-35s because of their purchase or interest at the time in the S-400, they said, well, we're going to have the F-16s. And then they excluded them from the whole program after Erdogan started to become closer to Russia. And that's bothering Israel even more. The fact that they're able to have this balance of power somehow and have this position with NATO alongside the position with Russia. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. All of this in the greater picture, well, affects bigger countries. China recently had very dangerous statements telling the United States we're ready for every war, trade war, political war, and any other type of war with the United States. They didn't have to say that, by the way. They could have simply kept it to themselves. They could have said, we're ready for a trade war. You want a trade war? Welcome. But they said any war. And it's not only China. It's Russia and it's Iran too. And now they are conducting more naval exercises together. China Russia, and Iran drills in the Gulf of Oman that will include simulated attacks and joint search and rescue operations, the Chinese Defense Ministry says. This is very important. Now, they previously said that it was pre-planned and it was already set up from the beginning. However, the fact that they are conducting these drills together, and you're talking about military drills called the Security Belt 2025, this is a strong message. And when they conduct this operation in the Gulf of Oman, this also means that Oman is in coordination with them, because Iran conducted a military drill with Oman in the past month in the Strait of Hormuz, and they dictated the movement at the time, sending again messages to any countries hostile to Iran that, well, we can control that way, the Red Sea, but you haven't really tested us yet. And China, in these drills, they will be sending the Type 052D guided missile destroyer, supply ship as well, and the 47th Naval Escort Task Force to take part of the exercise. And of course, the Russians will be participating too. This is a very strong message from these three countries against the United States primarily. Because there is a notion in the United States that, well, the Trump administration is getting closer to Russia. The administration is trying to use this slightly as leverage to take Russia, shift Russia off potentially China and Iran. However, that is too late. That is not going to happen. China, Iran, and Russia, they didn't always have this harmonious relationship. They're growing a harmonious and have been growing this harmonious relationship for a while now. And there's no turning back. There's no turning back because these three countries individually faced the problems of the United States. They saw how the United States approaches them, and they know that Donald Trump is only there for 4 years, and he's never going to be able to be a president again. That's it. He's going to have his 8 years done by American law. You cannot be a president for more than 4 years. So this move and this drill as well is proving that this triangle between China, Russia, and Iran is only growing, and they're only coordinating more, and they will continue to increase this development in their relationship in opposition to or to counter the constant hostility coming from the United States and its allies. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. I'll open the space up for community participation. Sorry, it took a lot of your time today, 50 minutes. We usually have a shorter time and more space for the community, but I'll try and take as many questions as possible with the limited time that we have. And if you wouldn't mind highlighting any questions you have for me. And welcome again, everyone, to another late live stream this evening. Okay. Mahib, first one. Salam Mahmoud, salam my friend. The main bargaining asset Hamas has are hostages and the strength of their resistance. Once they are released, and if Hamas demilitarizes, what's stopping Israel restarting? Well, you mentioned things that are correct. The biggest asset that they have are the prisoners of war, and therefore they're leaving that card until the end. And they're leaving their, well, aces and jokers up until the end, who are the commanders of the Gaza division, who were imprisoned on the 7th of October. And their resistance too. That will not end so long as there is a reason for their resistance to exist, because the resistance is an antidote to a problem. And that problem is, well, supremacy, occupation, genocide, killing, and justice. So long as these things continue, the antidote will remain there. It will continue to work. Once released, and if Hamas demilitarizes, again, these are two assumptions, and we need to scrutinize these things very carefully. So once they're released, they're not going to be released up until Hamas gets what they want. That's all we need to know. They're not going to be released up until there is a confirmation. That's why the phase 2 talks are now going ahead, and Israel is going to go on Wednesday, potentially with prowess to close, and the United States are calling Hamas nice guys. And if Hamas demilitarizes, if Hamas declares that they will demilitarize, or if Hamas declares that they will disarm as Hamas, then there's not really a big problem with that. Why? Because that doesn't mean they're going to disarm their armed group. Izz al-Din al-Qassam brigades, they armed the armed wing of Hamas. So Hamas, no problem. I can disarm. I won't have a police force in Gaza. We'll have an independent police force formed of the Palestinian population of Gaza. So that's not a problem. But you can't touch the resistance. And I do not believe that they will be agreeing with the resistance. What's stopping Israel restarting? Listen, what's stopping Israel restarting with this and without this as well? Israel can continue the war in any situation, really. And whether they have this deal or not, they have the capacity to continue. However, this clearly indicates that there is progress, there is dynamics, and that Hamas are, well, very lenient, and they know their terminology very well. And they know exactly what can be used in that agreement in terms of terminology and how they can use it to their benefit. And thank you for Mahib. And Stephen Kelly said, still no word over True Promise 3. No, so long as this continues, the path of de-escalation. But there are more statements from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Today, there was a report that the Secretary General of Hezbollah said that this situation cannot last forever, and Israel will know, and Lebanon will know, that the only way Israel understands is the way of arms and force, and not through diplomacy. Meaning, well, that ultimatum of Hezbollah to give to the state to try and diplomatically reach an agreement with Israel to withdraw from Lebanon might not be that long. There are settlers praying in Lebanon. Have you seen the settlers going to Lebanon and praying in Lebanese territories? If you haven't, I'll show you. They have been going with the blessing of the Israeli army and praying on Lebanese territories. There you go. Israel settlers storm purported rabbi's shrine. Well, that's not actually a storm, really. They were allowed. They were allowed to go there. So I have my reservations on the, wording here. They were allowed by the Israeli army because previously there was an attempt to storm, and there were warnings, and they had to go. So that's problematic, and that's also problematic for Hezbollah's image too. Look, Hezbollah were resisting Israel all of that time to expel them from South Lebanon. Now they have that. People going there saying, oh, this is a shrine, this is a holy place, and tomorrow someone will say this is promised land. Well, they're already saying, they've been saying it's a promised land. It's more tense with Hezbollah. And also another thing that's important is how the dynamics would look with Hezbollah. Like, will they be, if they want to do something, will they do it in their own way, or will there be something new? We previously spoke about the reports in Lebanon, including from sources close to Hezbollah, that we might actually see a new resistance in Lebanon, because clearly there are geographical changes that are having this new formation of something new, right? But from an Iranian perspective, so long as things don't go out of hand, I don't think they will be doing any true promise 3. Unless that is, things escalate. And by the way, let's also link the Israeli moves with the threat that came from Ansarullah 2 days ago when they gave Israel an ultimatum of 4 days. That's due to expire on Tuesday, actually, meaning 1 day before the delegation is in Qatar. Will Israel open the board? Will they lift the siege? That would be very interesting to see as well. And Fee is saying any negotiations on IDF withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor. All of that is included in phase 2. Phase 2 includes Israeli total withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor, excuse me, and also from the buffer zone. Buffer zone, they need to get out of the buffer zone. So that's a red line from Egypt. That's a red line from the Palestinian resistance. They're going to have to go out. Therefore, any success of phase 2 means Israel is out of every inch of Gaza. That's what's going to happen. And the Alchemists, thank you. You said that Trump employs similar strategies to Ukraine, criticizing Russia while punishing Ukraine. He's aware of the situation and doesn't want to be involved. I think Trump is employing a strategy, and that strategy is starting to become more visible. I'm not sure how aware he is of the level of harm it can do. But saying all of that, let's see the results on the ground. Hell, if the results on the ground are totally opposite to what Donald Trump says, and he constantly faces, he constantly threatens with hell, right? If he manages to succeed on the ground, good. But it won't be, by the way, Trump. It wouldn't be like it was Trump, It would be with the resilience of the people, especially if we want to talk about Gaza, and how bravely they confronted this genocide for all this period. Tommy O. Mahmoud, I'm not clear on your feelings of Julani. Are you a believer in and a supporter of him? I am neither a believer nor a supporter of Julani. Many people like to say or claim things. They are entitled to, no problem. But I never showed any support for Al-Julani or Shara, and I never necessarily had this belief that you're talking about. However, what I do have is a genuine intention, firstly, a genuine will and hope and a prayer for what's good for the Syrian people. And I also am not dragged by propaganda, even when it comes from people who might be reliable in other sources too. So therefore, in Syria, I monitor things as they are, and I want what's best for Syria and the Syrian people. And with Julani or Ashara, I view him as any other leader. We focus on what he does and scrutinize him based on that, regardless of the noise. The noise does not bother me whatsoever, and I'm not influenced by any propaganda being pushed, whether on social media or mainstream media. That doesn't bother me whatsoever, and it also doesn't bother me if that attracts criticism too. And I hope that clarifies. And if you need more clarification, please do ask. And thank you, Tommy, all for that. Ray Linmon, hello, Mahmoud. How much Palestinian troops will it take to liberate Palestine if Syria and Lebanon doesn't do the same invasion? Well, look, I think we need to understand here that we have a new reality. That new reality is, well, Israel is expanding. They're in Lebanon. They're occupying Lebanon. They're occupying Syria. They're occupying all of Palestine, not just Gaza. And that was the case for a very long time. All of that from Israel is a move to counter how hard they were hit and how hard their image was hit. this country that is trying to intimidate everyone and say, you know, no one can touch us. No, we want to go and we want to occupy them. We want to drag and we want to cause civil wars in Syria. We want to cause civil wars in Lebanon. We want to cause civil war also in Gaza and the West Bank too. And we want to expel the population. Desperation. And it will not be successful in the medium and in the long terms as well. What happens between now and then? It could be many things. It could be very many things. And how many troops it was. So the troops that we're talking about is no longer only about liberating Palestine now. It's about liberating the whole of the Levant of West Asia and getting rid of this cancer to the whole of humanity. So this is how we need to approach this. There is a stain on humanity called Israel and everyone who supports it. And that's a humanity problem. That's a problem for everyone sitting in Europe, in America, in Africa, and anywhere. But of course, primarily the people of the Levant who are paying the heaviest price of this barbarism and genocide. So it's not just them. However, when the time comes and when that support is gone for Israel from its current main backers, it wouldn't necessarily include a big fight, by the way. I think they will be driven out by fear if they see people coming. And we clearly saw in the past 15 months how this formation, this post-World War II / post-Sykes-Picot formation of the whole region has done nothing but harm to the countries of the region, and how people who are just a few miles away and sometimes meters away cannot actually give food to the people of Gaza, regardless of their excuses. And I don't think it will necessarily take that long, because unless there is some sort of dramatic, very dramatic move inside of Israel that will shift from its traditional and historical position, then there is always a risk of things exploding all at once. And it will not only be from Palestinians, but the Palestinians will be at the heart of it, just like Gaza proved the case. And Marvin is also saying, regarding 5 strategic points held in IDF in Lebanon, you think Lebanese will take them back? I am skeptical of the Lebanese diplomatic ability to force them to get out without any force. However, I don't rule that out. Yes, history shows that it didn't work before. That doesn't mean it's never going to work again. Maybe they would be able to do something in exchange for, I don't know, security guarantees, a long-term ceasefire. Don't forget when the 2006 war happened, or what's labeled as the Second Lebanese War, there were 17 years of quiet on the Lebanese-Israeli borders. There were breaches from Israel, but there was no war. So if we have something and the longevity of any agreement that would potentially include Lebanon and Gaza and Syria at some point, then it could potentially be a long term. However, the problem will remain there so long as, like I said, Israel in its current form exists as it is without a dramatic change that would include inevitably equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea, where every human being receives equal human rights, really, between the Jordan River to the sea. Zakaria al-Balawi, Mahmoud, salam alaikum, brother, alaikum assalam. Did you know if the Houthis really sent fighters to fight against the new government? And why there's no Arab leaders in Gaza? Why do not Arab leaders help Gaza people fight but fight each other? Against the new government where? If you reference to Syria's, no. And if Arab leaders, that's traditionally what the Arab countries were good at. They're quick to fight each other, very, very late to fight, the real culprits. And that's still the case. And that's very problematic. And that's one of the reasons that contributed to the big problems that are happening. If Israel faced a genuine, ultimatum or what have you, then they could have had a different approach, or slightly de-escalating what they do. And Tory saying, wouldn't all in the region know that things will not change if not Israel directly confronted major parties and ground forces once and for all? I think they're starting to understand that, because to be fair, the threat started to reach countries that have peace treaties with Israel and countries who are potential future partners of Israel, like Saudi Arabia. Like the prospect of war with Egypt became a common talk now in Israel. Every once in a while, that prospect comes up. Even today, some of them are saying that, we're not seeing it immediately happening, but in the long term, if we see some threat, then we will definitely take action, all sorts of stuff. Threats, warnings, Israeli delegation even raising concerns with Egypt about their presence in the Sinai Peninsula. I think Jordan is starting to understand a little bit more. Saudi Arabia reached a level where they told Israel, well, hell, expel the Israelis, don't expel the Palestinians. They're the cause of the problem. Maybe then we will get rid of the problem. So I think, they're causing so many problems, even with the countries that they want to make peace with. Do you know what I mean? And meantime, the West Bank is the new Gaza. The West Bank is facing, and we've been speaking about the West Bank since this escalation happened. Again, another cover-up, another attempt for Israel to run away from its military defeat in Gaza and humiliation in Gaza, flexing muscles on innocent civilians. They destroy homes every day, kill people every day in the West Bank. I mean, it's not to the level of what Gaza used to get in terms of blows, but it doesn't make it in any way, shape or form good. It's pure evil what they're doing in the West Bank. And I think the West Bank was and always will be, up until this apartheid regime is completely eliminated, a stamp of shame on everyone, really, who didn't address what's happening there, like Gaza. Because in the West Bank, this has been the case for decades now. Streets for Israelis, streets for Palestinians, imposing lockdown on 200,000 people in Hebron whenever they feel like it, preventing people from administrative detentions, field executions of everyone, shooting for fun, checkpoints every minute, stealing, taking people's homes, expelling people from their homes and stealing them. In many cases, expelling from their home just to go and sleep in them, Israeli soldiers. So it's very problematic. And again, you need a comprehensive solution. I don't see that happening unless there's something that would deal with the actual core root of the problem. Perceived reality. Hi, Mahmoud. Julani's thugs are brave against unarmed civilians, but cowards won't fight against Israel. Your argument, do you also apply it on Assad? 52 years Israel occupied the Golan Heights. He didn't fire a bullet. Did you say the same against that on Assad? He killed more than Julani did, and he was quiet for a longer period than Julani was quiet against Israel occupying much smaller parts of Syria than they did when Al-Assad was there and his father. Do you say the same things about them? And there is no excuse for killing unarmed civilians. I'm 100% with you. Condemned from any person, reprehensible, abhorrent, whether from Julani or anyone else. This is what I think. I think anyone applying this argument on Syria now Oh, he doesn't fight Israel. Where were you for half a century of the Golan being occupied and Assad and his father not firing a bullet on Israel? And where were you, all of you, when hundreds of thousands were being massacred with barrels of TNT? Where were you exactly? What, sleeping? And you woke up now and Julani took over and all of a sudden we have this, propaganda 24/7. I think you people really need to compare. And some people are very ignorant about the history of al-Assad's family and look into it so that you don't fall into this trap of criticizing certain things now that you weren't criticizing with al-Assad. You need to question yourselves. And these are my genuine thoughts. And Donna, what about aid going into Gaza? It's not going in, unfortunately, and they also cut off electricity. They cut off electricity off Gaza, and the positive sign is that we have, talks happening on Wednesday. Hopefully, they will reach us to phase 2. And if they do reach to phase 2, that means hopefully the war will end. Will end for now, and we have a long-term ceasefire. Stephen Kelly, why Egypt couldn't send energy generators to Gaza? Egypt supplies Gaza with approximately 30% of electricity. People need to understand that. So if Israel cuts off electricity, based on the information from the ground, something will still be going in from Egypt. Is Israel able to have any sort of control on that or take down the generators or what have you? There would be an effect there, potentially. But, the problem is the Rafah crossing is subject to a trilateral agreement, again, and Israel now occupies the Philadelphia corridor, and that's a problem for Egypt and for the Palestinians too. The alchemist, in my opinion, to understand Trump's direction, must pay close attention to him outside the government, such as Tucker Carlson coverage of the genocide. Look, to understand Trump, we need to listen to him, and he needs to be held accountable with statements. There is no excuse of him playing this 5D chess game and getting away with saying that the Palestinians in Gaza can die and having these abhorrent statements. But I think it's important. Yeah, it is important. And it's also important to hear what some of the people in his administrations do. And it's also important to see what's happening on the ground. Like I said, if it's going to reach a level where we're going to have a ceasefire and, Trump actually managed to good, amazing. And to hell with what he says, really, because, so long as it's implemented on the ground. But it is absolutely important. It is absolutely important. Lisa Bahouth, Mahmoud just got on and we are talking about Lebanon. Anything about the colossal embassy being built in Lebanon, it's bothering me. Well, I think the thing that should be bothering everyone is that embassy that's already existing there and having undeclared flights 24/7 from there to Cyprus without any declaration of anything and no one criticizing it, and instead criticizing Iran sending some money to rebuild South Lebanon. I think that's a big problem. Some people in Lebanon also fall into this hypocrisy trap of criticizing Iran and not criticizing the United States Embassy. Not criticizing the money that they get, not criticizing the people in Lebanon who are funded by the embassy. Lisa Johnson, what's her name, the ambassador? She said she wanted civil war. The people need to rise up against Hezbollah, she said, inside of Lebanon, when they were fighting Israel. So these people are trying to have civil wars. These people are the U.S. Embassy, wherever the U.S. Embassy is, look for problems. And that clearly shows that you have people who are compromised in top figures in the Lebanese government. And that's why I have reluctance on their levels of success in, managing to expel the Israeli occupiers. Okay, we have time for a couple of more questions. Gullyberg, Mahmoud, I've read that Egypt is sending their military equipment to the border. Are things heating up between them and the Zion entity? Listen, Egypt has done, and I have spoken about it many times, many things that are considered to be a preparation for an all-out war. And guess what? On the other hand, there's a party that's not prepared, and that's Israel. Israel's not prepared. The recent statement that came from one of the officials in the Israeli army to one of the residents in the south who was complaining about so much presence of Egyptian army on the borders with them was downplaying it by saying, we see no imminent threat from Egypt. Is he relying on the peace treaty? Others, well, they beg to differ. They're very concerned about it, but are they being as naive as they were before, or are they just downplaying it because they simply don't have an answer? Israel doesn't have an answer. I mean, like Egypt, Egypt is a strong country, and the army in Egypt, and again, regardless of what you think of the government, the army of Egypt, you're talking about an army based on principles, and to a very large extent, faith, by the way, driven by these things. People need to remember that about the Egyptian army. And their number one enemy is Israel, although they have a peace treaty with them, because all of their military drills are against Israel. So there are definitely things heating up. However, so long as we are on a course towards de-escalation, that heat fades away, but it never completely goes away. Do you know why? Because even when the relations were amazing and there was no war and there was nothing, they were always preparing for the northeastern front, and that front is called the Israeli front. Ryan 78, thank you, and also thank you everyone else. By the way, I'm sorry if I missed any of the people who sent supers. The Alchemist and Ryan 78 and Matlas X. Ryan 78, I don't think Netanyahu have any more cards to play. No ceasefire if you think Israel will start a genocide. If no ceasefire, I think we are headed towards a ceasefire. I think that ceasefire will remain a fragile ceasefire, despite any guarantees, because the problem is still there. And I think if they don't have a ceasefire, then there could be an escalation. But I mean, not being optimistic or pessimistic, I'm not really personally seeing an escalation as the one that we have witnessed before the ceasefire, personally. And the Matlas also is saying, what are the latest news about the resistance in Iraq? We haven't heard from much. It's because they actually were in an agreement with Iran and the United States that they actually don't attack any US bases inside of Iraq, and they also paused the attacks on Israel a long while ago. Now, does that mean they're totally out of the picture? In the meantime, in the meantime, right? I think if things escalate to a level where, you know, they need to participate, then yeah, that's a different story. And also, I think what many people don't consider is the internal politics in Iraq, by the way, because there are some elements in, well, both Iran and Iraq, like in Lebanon, who are like, why should we even participate for anything to do with Palestine? Like, we will support them diplomatically and politically. And, you know, that's it. But apart from that, you know what, we can't do anything about it. So I think there are multiple calculations, Iranian linked with internal politics, and also linked with attempts also and calls from within Iraq to, that's it, combine these, you know, armed groups. I mean, some call them militias or armed groups, whatever of the many names, into the Ministry of Defense, and that's it. Saying that, many of them are already, by the way, in very good relations with the Ministry of Defense, and they have been trying to project kind of more responsibility or more, you know, statesmanship about what's happening. And perceived reality, I had more elaboration from you following your previous question. You said that was a weak response. Complaining about Assad doesn't justify Julani's thugs killing Alawite civilians in Syria. There is no excuse for killing unarmed civilians. Well, I think that actually it's exceptionally relevant for people who are calling to get Assad back to have a reality check and a bit of a wake-up call and ask where on earth they were all of this time that they were supporting Assad. And the reason that it's important to highlight that is because their excuse was Syria is not prepared, Syria is under attack, Syria is divided, we have this and we have that. And then everything became invalid with al-Julani or al-Shara. Then you're saying the killing of Alawites and there is no excuse. I already said there is no excuse. Was there anything not clear in my message? There is no excuse in killing any civilian based on any innocent civilian, especially based on abhorrent sectarian motives, whether Abu Julani or Julani or Assad or whoever the hell it is. That's why Iran was criticized in Syria and Hezbollah were criticized in Syria. And if anyone does anything that's killing armed civilians and humanitarian breaches, they have a problem. And that's condemned. And that's a very, very relevant point, by the way. And the points that are raised, by the way, in comparison to al-Assad are extremely relevant. Because like I said, some people are calling to get him back. Dude, the man left nothing from Syria. He ruined everything, ruined the economy, barrels of TNT on people, right? Reports of chemical weapons. Palestine, go read about Al-Yarmouk camp and what the resistance government did in Al-Yarmouk. Really, I think it's very relevant. It's exceptionally relevant. And again, thank you for your participation, my friend. Splatted. And we'll wrap with Splatted. I've been going on for 1.5 hours. But I'll be back again anyway, don't worry. Okay, Splatted, do you think they will rebuild Gaza more safer for the civilians in terms of bomb shelters, infrastructure, underground, e.g. generators, better water security? I think the way the plan for Gaza to be rebuilt is very, very, is going to be very advanced. The plans that have been submitted by Egypt, extremely thorough. They deal with infrastructure, they deal with technology, healthcare facilities, education. But in relation to bomb shelters, that's a very, very relevant question. From what I've seen from the maps, I haven't seen anything as such. And that's something that indeed should be mentioned. Now, there's something about the bomb shelters of Gaza that would have a lot of sensitivity, especially with the fact that the resistance has a network of tunnels. A network of tunnels means that if someone wants to build a bomb shelter, it can't come close to those tunnels. And I think the Palestinian resistance wouldn't want to expose everything. However, it shouldn't really be an excuse to protect civilians, bearing in mind that the previous planning, it did not really include anything as such. However, it is a very, very important point. And I think it's very relevant. I mean, how likely are they to survive, you know, the level of bombs that Israel was landing? Some of them difficult, but undeniably there would be less mortality if anything like that, you know, and we hope it never happens again, does happen inside of Gaza. And I hope I thanked MahmoodOD as well, and everyone else who participated. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. And thank you for everyone who participated, whether you agree with me or not. Much appreciated. And thank you for everyone who sent supers as well. MahmoodOD, Ryan78, The Alchemist, The Alchemist, The Alchemist. Thank you very much. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed. Take care. I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.